Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Yes, I sound a little bit poorly, but I can assure you that I'm actually getting better. But I don't really want to get this video out, so that could be damned as far as I'm concerned. Now, before we start, there's a couple of people I want to really thank before we start this video for helping me figure this out or giving me bits of information. Obviously, TWR986, really appreciate what you've done. He had a Thomas from this range, what range you'll see in a second, and it sort of helped me to figure a few things out there. And also, I'm not sure what his Twitter handle is, but the guy's called Tem. I met him on a Discord server, and he was really helpful for telling me a few little details here and there. So we've worked out a rough timeline for these guys. What are these guys? Well, that's a brilliant question, and that's sort of the million-dollar question that we've been spending the past few, we spent a couple of days figuring out. Now, these are kind of well known. One of them is really well known because it's very notorious. But the rest of these kind of just blend in, and no one is quite sure what they are. So let's start with what they aren't. On the wiki, these things are listed as bath toys. However, we have seen packaging for these. We've seen how they were sold. And these were sold in plastic, like plastic little satchels, with a little bit of cardboard at the top. And at the cardboard at the top, it's never referred to explicitly as a bath toy. These are always referred to as squeaky toys. Dog toys? No, just squeaky toys. They go by the name of Squeaky Friends. So, yes, they're on the wiki as bath toys, but they are not bath toys. Important first note. Secondly, they were not made by just one company. Now, of the ones I have, a fair few of them are stamped underneath with licensing information and the company of JotaStar. Now, JotaStar, from what we're able to figure out, was one of the two companies that made these toys. The other company being a company called Decker. Okay? As you can see here, of what we've been able to figure out, we believe that this blue style of packaging was first, then this more lighter blue style with the graphic was second, and those are both JotaStar, and then Decker is third. We don't have perfect dates for all these, but it would have been late 80s for JotaStar into the early 90s, and then more later, mid to later 90s for the Decker ones. And what I can tell, JotaStar and Decker are both toy manufacturers. There isn't much to really look into there. I think it's just an important detail to note. So these are late 80s, early 90s toys. Now, when I first planned to film this video, I only had Percy. But I went, you know what? That's not really good enough, is it? So I bought another Percy. Now, this one does not have a squeaker, or the squeaker does not work properly. However, it is also, just make that out, a JotaStar released one. This is licensing 1990. The original Percy I had is licensed for 1990 as well. Now, from what we can tell, based on the packaging we've seen, Percy was the third item released in the range. The first two were most definitely Thomas, who looks a little odd. This has not got licensing information here. However, it does have licensing information here, which is 1988. Yep, William Heinemann. Now, this was something important that Tem told me that I probably would have made the mistake of repeating here. And that is that Heinemann is not a toy company. That's the licensing information for the Thomas range in the mid to late 80s. As he showed me, if you look on Ertls, it's also licensed as Heinemann, even though the company that made them was Ertl. Important detail I wanted to get right. So Thomas was the second/first. There's no real way to know the order of these first two. They were released at the same time, as you can see by this JotaStar packet. Again, earlier style. But what we do have There's also this guy. This is Sir Topham Hatt. Now I have a few here, and they're a bit different. What's interesting is because these obviously had licensing changes over time, of the three I have, one of them has the William Heinemann licensing for 1988. You can see down the bottom. It's also licensed for 1989 on the bottom. A bit weird. But then this one, okay, this is a later one. This is 1990. No Jodastar licensing on this one, but the Heinemann licensing on the back of the legs has been very crudely sort of melted over. So clearly they changed the, basically the machines that made these just, maybe they're just like, I'm not sure how they make rubber things. It might be a mold. They basically scratched it off in the mold. But you can tell they didn't do a very good job because it's still faintly visible. And then this is a much later one. Some of these squeakers still work. There you go. This is a later one. This is a 1989 license one on the bottom, but doesn't have the Heinemann licensing on the back. See, again, it's been sort of melted off. But this is maybe a knockoff. Hard to tell, but again, this is all yellowed, which makes me feel like this is at least slightly lower quality, and even sort of feel it. Kind of hard to tell, but yellowing is something we've only seen on a few of them. These could also have been the Decker ones. Again, these are definitely the earlier Jodastar ones, so it could have been a Decker one or Decker issue. So what you're seeing here, that's the first and second, or only first two ones produced, and the third one produced. And now we get into the Notorious one. I'll do a proper spin around of all of these toward the end of the video, but the Notorious one is partly because it looks a little bit inappropriate. Oh boy, Toby. This is probably the one I knew the most about, or had seen the most prior to making this video. It's also licensed under Jodastar, but we've only seen it, I think, on the back of Decker cards. It's a little bit confusing. There's also the possibility that Decker and Jodastar made these products at the same time for different markets. We have found one that has Japanese writing. I think that was a Jodastar one. I'll correct myself if not. But yeah, look, Toby. See, the thing about the faces on these guys is that they're all slightly weird. I mean, the Percy's is kind of odd. It's like this darkish grey with very thin eyebrows and just kind of an odd look to it. Thomas's doesn't look too bad. I mean, this actually captures Thomas's likeness pretty well. Topham Hatt's is Topham Hatt's. I think this is probably one of the best looking ones of the range. But then Toby's is just straight up black. Like, let's not beat around the bush. This is just bizarre. Now, I've seen a couple of Tobys in Australia. I'm not sure about overseas, but definitely in Australia I've seen a few of these. And, you know, I've never really been interested in picking them up until now. And I think that's kind of the weird thing about these, is that these are really, really, really uncommon. And I just happened to luck out and was able to pick up the entire range in a day. Partly because there was a Thomas, a Percy, and a Topham Hatt for sale in the UK. The Toby was for sale here. I already had one of the Percys, and there was a couple of Topham Hatts. I learned after the fact, actually, that TWI Ryan 86 had a Thomas, so I didn't actually need to buy the UK lot. Because to be clear, this guy came from Australia. These two, and I think the yellow Topham Hatt, were from the UK. The two other Topham Hatts were from Australia, and the Toby was from Australia. And I think all up for this, for everything you see here, I paid about 140 Australian. Which I will say is probably too much. I just wanted them all, and it just so happened that there was a way to get them all relatively cheaply and relatively quickly. Because I really wanted to film this video, because these are just so obscure and just not really talked about. And this is kind of the, I guess, the state or the natural way of things for Thomas items that are sort of pre-Wooden Railway and pre-Tomy. You know, the only other item that was around at this time that was a really, really big toy range was Ertl. And so it's kind of weird looking at that sort of post-Ertl but pre-Wooden Railway, pre-Tomy releases. They just were so strange because it was really hard to tell whether they were based on the show or the books. Now, I think these either predate season 3 or they're around the same time. Definitely but definitely the early 90s ones would have been season 3. So I hope that answers a lot of questions. There was a guy on YouTube, I'll link his video if I can remember, who asked really what were they, and I think this is a good answer. And just a bit of a very quick summary, just sort of a recap for this whole video. No, they're not bath toys. They're Squeaky friends. Yes, they were released in the late 80s, early 90s. They were made by two companies, Jodastar and Decca. And yes, they are fucking bizarre. Should you collect them? I don't want this to be a sort of... How do I put this? I think that they're funny. They are funny releases. And they borderline on looking like knockoffs. It's kind of hilarious how close they are to knockoffs. I mean, if you saw these at a garage sale or a market, you could be forgiven for thinking they are, because genuinely, these don't feel like they're up to the same quality standards as later Thomas products. And they just don't make sense. Why would you make Thomas Squeaky toys? It's just dumb. And so I'm left wondering, who were these for? I mean, like, look at this Thomas. Look at the quality control. It's just terrible. Like, even on the face, these are really, really shoddy. Age's not been too kind, and they are a tad sticky. But again, look at the paint here. There's none here, but then look at that there. They are really not well made when you start looking at the finer details. And you can tell some of this was just factory errors. They fall into this weird area of Thomas collecting where I can't say, yes, you should go out and get these. But they're also kind of just goofy. And for someone who really likes the dumb shit, this works for me. And I think that if you want to go collect these, you've got to ask yourself the same question. Does this work for me? I think I've said enough. If you have any other questions, I'll try to answer them. Again, big thanks to GWR96 and Tem. Love your work. I think that's all for now. So have a good day, and bye for now.